Hello and welcome to another episode of the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. As you can see, once again this is a special installment because after last week's episode, A Distant Star, both Meike and Layla got lost in hyperspace for a little bit. But not to worry, we are going to return to our regular schedule next week as usual. Today we are going to do something slightly different. As you can see already, we are taking another look at the Babylon 5 Shadow Wars modification for the classic RTS Star Wars Empire at War. And as we've done before for the Earth Alliance, we are going to take a look at this faction in a skirmish mode, this time around the Centauri Republic. We are going to take a look at how this game chooses to represent them, or rather how the modders choose to represent this faction, how this correlates with what we see of them in the lore, and of course this is pretty fitting to the point where we are in the show right now, because it's already noticeable that the Centauri Republic is going to emerge as the sort of big antagonist, big bad of the second season. This is at the same time also kind of another worst case scenario imagining for the Earth Alliance, because that is our enemy in this first engagement here. Anybody who has seen 5 bits and bobs of this mod before will know it is slightly unfinished, although it's one of the best modifications set in the Babylon 5 universe out there, but for this reason you will see and hear every so often little leftovers of the Star Wars universe, like us fighting over Endor. But it's not that hard to imagine that in this case. This is just a distant kind of colony that the Centauri are defending against an onslaught of the Earth Alliance. We can already see that our first guest, a Hyperion cruiser, is here. We are going to see a lot of those, because just like in the show, the Earth Alliance just has an absolute unlimited supply of these. And we are going to set it in a little bit of an ambush here with our beautiful Warchan medium warships. Now, when fighting as the Earth Alliance, I already talked a little bit about the fact that being a glass cannon is something that is very big in this mod. The Earth Alliance wants to overwhelm its enemies with a lot of firepower, because it doesn't really have all that much in terms of armor. But if that is true for the Earth Alliance already, it's even more so the case for the Centauri Republic in this mod, which is really mainly focused on forward firepower and does not want to get caught out of position. We see the AI take a slightly different approach to the Earth Alliance. Here we saw 3 Thunderbolt squadrons try to do a bombing run on this Warchan cruiser, but that didn't turn out so well. Anything that tries to approach a Centauri warship from the front is not going to be in a very good position. Just taking a look at the state of the battlefields for now, all of these things look obviously familiar. The wonderful station of the Centauri resembling that of Ragesh 3. And for now, we are really just fighting as the Centauri Republic, but as you can imagine, this is not going to stay the case for very long, because in this modification and in the base game Star Wars Empire at War Forces of Corruption, 3 big factions is kind of what this entire game is built around. And so, to make this work for the Babylon 5 universe, the mod kind of lumps together various sort of big power blocks together. So the Centauri Republic is going to involve a lot of the quote-unquote bad guy forces that have been seen working together in the show as well. Narratively for us, this is easily explained by just saying, well, it's quite kind of typical for the Centauri, right, to start kind of their mess up on their own and then later on rely on allies to try and break them out of it, which, well, historically doesn't always work out so well. So far we've managed to take control of a lot of the resource points on this map. The Earth Alliance has fallen back a little bit, and our Warchan class cruiser is going to try and push the initiative a little bit here. It has this wonderful ability of overloading its weapons, just increasing the rate of fire pretty massively, and as you can see, this will quickly melt through the defenses of that little mining outpost. The Hyperion cruiser can do something similar. We see it is taking a rough beating our Warchan here. Alongside the Star Furies, the cruiser is really bombarding it from afar, but of course we can call in some reinforcements to try and break it out of here. We have this slightly smaller Centauri warship, which is in most aspects just a smaller version of the Warchan. It has decent firepower and a high rate of fire again, and we have this insidious little Drag Raider here, a Drag vessel that is basically starfighter sized but shoots a massive energy beam that takes a lot of damage out of basically anything it hits at. The Star Furies will be able to counter this to some degree, but For now, this has saved our Fortune warship, and we're going to assemble these in a little battle group and try keep the pressure on the Earth Alliance that has started encroaching on our territory here a little bit. You can already see in the menu here we have other options. I try to stick to the Centauri Republic for a little bit here. Let's see if the old guard, the Puritans of the Republic, have a chance of winning this battle without relying on Mr. Morgan and his associates. The Centauri obviously are quite famous for utilizing these little mines, these automated weapons platforms. This one didn't have much chance against the Hyperion battle group there, but we are going to try and use these to secure our territories a little bit more later on. It is quite fun to see how more or less dynamic the AI in this game can react to you. Here we see a nice little backstabbing maneuver by this Hyperion cruiser trying to go for our economy. We are going to respond to that with a beautiful little Dirac engagement while our frontline forces kind of reassemble themselves. This poor Voltron cruiser is so damaged, I don't think it will stand up in most fights, but at a distance it can probably still be a nice bombarding platform. We see it has the nice forward-facing towers right there. I'm quite fond of the Centauri warships actually. They are very nicely ornate, sort of imperial vessels without going for the overwhelming size that something like the Galactic Empire and Star Wars does. Slowly but surely we are assembling a little Dirac fighting force here. Probably not a very good idea to rely on them. We know that they have a very bad history with Centauri, but, well, if in this timeline a Centauri Earth Alliance war breaks up much sooner than in the actual show, probably the Centauri don't suspect a thing yet. And here we see the poor Hyperion cruiser getting ambushed from the back there and bombarded quite quickly. This little Dirac mothership is just roughly cruiser sized. There is a much bigger version of it in this game. It is not very good at dishing out damage, at least not compared to the glass cannon mainline battleships of the Centauri, but it can soak up damage really well. This is something I really enjoy about factions that are built around combining these sort of alliances of various species that complement each other really well, and I think they did a nice job portraying this here. Now, finally, at tech level 4, we are in a position to call in more Warchan warships without relying on our garrison or hero units. They're still kind of expensive, but we can start going for that soon. We also have these really cute little patrol boats on the side there. Very squishy, but they have a wonderful ability of getting rid of incoming missiles, which is something that the Earth Alliance likes to rely on a lot. So we see it here heroically trying to get in between the Starfury squadrons, fighting those up a bit, and then hiding not so heroically in the central nebula. With some heavier reinforcements on the way, it does look quite good for the Centauri Republic right now. Maybe we are going to be able to uphold the glory and our status as the Lion of the Galaxy all on our own here, with just a little bit of help on the Dirac side. We are going to use this little fighter squadron to drop some energy mines right there. Oh, not energy mines, that's what the Narn use. These little automatic weapons platforms to harass this station from one side while the Dirac battle groups attacks from the other. But of course, as we all know from Babylon 5 itself, Earth Alliance space stations, even though they're primitive, even though they're rotating, are quite tough nuts to crack. They have a lot of turrets on there, so trying to break through these defenses will mean laying siege to the station for a prolonged time. Quite harmonious to see our little Centauri vessel and the Dirac retreating here. We are going to try and secure our resource points and assemble a little bit of a larger fleet that we can jump in at one point. The Earth Alliance, of course, has a bunch of little Olympus-class corvettes, but as we saw there, if they get taken out even just by a bunch of mines left behind, then they are probably not going to be very good at swinging the tide of battle right here. As with all factions in this mod, of course, the Centauri in the skirmish mode are a little bit more limited than they are in the Galactic Conquest, where we get to see a much larger roster for all their little independent constituent factions, so to say. We are going to get a look at these in the skirmish mode only through some of the hero units they have, which we might see a little bit later on. As always, plans to continue on a proper galactic conquest playthrough in this modification are something that I would love to pursue later on. The problem there is just that the game is pretty old, the mod is pretty old, the mod is not fully finished and polished out, so getting save games to work consistently is a little bit of a pain, and it's always especially frustrating if you have a few dozen hours in a playthrough and then it just goes out there without any explanation. So I'm just going to have to find a long weekend maybe to invest the time and effort to make that properly work. The Earth Alliance has started a little bit of a counter-assault here, which we are going to quickly ambush with a Watcher battle group. Once caught out of position, these older Hyperion class cruisers are quite easy pickings for us, especially if we have this nicely combined force, the anti-missile capabilities of the patrol boats, the rapid firepower of the smaller warships, and the mainline firepower of the Watchers. All that combined is pretty good at taking out anything that the Earth Alliance can throw at them, just as long as we keep the initiative. Much like the entire war effort that we will see of the Centauri Republic in the show, the game version of this faction really relies on the fact that you need to stay aggressive, need to stay in the fight. It's not very good at hunkering down, I suspect. Now the battle is properly going off. We see a lot of firing going back and forth, and as usual the cinematic battle cam made for Star Wars dogfights also does a really great job of capturing some of that fireworks for the Babylon 5 universe. Now we don't want to waste Centauri lives where we can avoid it, so let's just throw in the Dirac mothership right in the middle there. The fighters at the back are also going to take some initiative, maybe harass the enemy at the back a little bit, and our Dirac raiders can see if they can sneakily get behind some of these Hyperions trying to defend their station and take them out. Some of the lighter warships we see already have taken a beating, are burning up down there in the atmosphere, so maybe this frontal assault is not quite as successful as we would hope, but we already saw there is reinforcements on the way. Oh god, these look like two Hyperions crashing into each other, something that the Earth Alliance, is prone to do at some points. Let's see if some heavier reinforcements can be brought on the way. A Shadow Battle Crab, if anything like the show, should be able to single-handedly swing this fight quite quickly. Another beautiful ornate Warchunk class battleship here. There are slight variations of these. Obviously the mod tries to emulate the fact that in the show we mostly see fleets consisting of the same type of vessel by presuming that there's various variants of these different generations of warships in most of these factions. These two Warchunk class cruisers taking on the fight as long as they can. They have a really nice sort of bird of prey theming going on, which is much more focused on the beak than the bird of prey we see in something like Star Trek, which I'm quite fond of. In general, all the very martial sort of battle designs I'm usually quite fond of when it comes to spaceships, and as much as it pains me to see the Earth Alliance go down here, I think it is time to bring in the big guns, and we see the massive energy beams going from the Shadow Crab. Now the only time we've seen something like this really in any of the shows has been quite recently the road home, seeing an actual shadow attack on Babylon 5 and big Earth Alliance station. For the longest time, I guess this would have been the best way of seeing this battle play out, and we see the tiny Starfury here desperately trying as the Vorchan vessels claim victory over that burning up Hyperion cruiser. Now this is probably the time where the Centauri have to retreat and wonder about how they can spin this in their propaganda, that it was definitely only them that eked out this victory and Mr. Morton and his associates can just sneakily get away, and the galactic community hopefully remains oblivious to the fact that there's Eldritch horrors working together with the line of the galaxy. And just as we say that, these old shadow fighters are the last ones taking on dogfights with the Star Furies, and the rest of the fleet is utterly obliterated. Now this was perhaps a little bit of a one-sided battle. The Earth Alliance really got caught off guard here, which, let's assume this was the opening battle for a larger conflict, because even though this battle is won, of course, the war against the Earth Alliance is not, and we're going to go right into a slightly bigger, slightly tougher skirmish here where both sides will have a lot more defenses going on. We can maybe get to a point where the Centauri Republic calls in some of its more exotic units that we would like to showcase and see. In the backdrop here I have a bunch of battle scenes from other various skirmishes that I've played, and we see the war rages on. At some point we are probably also going to have a battle between the Army of Light and the Centauri Republic, when we have a whole alien on alien roster going on there. But for now, the Earth Alliance is taking a beating because we've spent so much time in past videos eking out victories for Clark and his regime. I think it's only fair that we beat them down a little bit. And once again we start with our little sentry fighters, noted as being some of the best Star Fury killers in the galaxy, although in this game all kinds of starfighters are a very mixed bag. They are very effective in certain situations, very effective at hunting down smaller units, but if they are caught out of position once and a good missile barrage hits them, the entire squadron disappears rather quickly. Now, we already talked about the fact that there are 3 factions in the vanilla game, the Star Wars themed one, and it's kind of interesting to see how the mod approaches translating these into Babylon 5 factions, and quite fittingly, the Centauri Republic is based on the criminal consortium, the underworld faction, so some of the updates, some of the upgrades for the mines still assume that, you know, to get better resource acquirements in the Centauri Republic, you are working with coercion and other criminal activities, which is quite fun. The Centauri are also the mainline faction that we suspect using a bunch of mercenaries, and on some of the maps, not on this one, but on some of the skirmish maps and in the campaign, there are little pirate stations that you can capture. Unfortunately, these in this mod still have Star Wars themed units, but you know, Star Wars pirate fighter and the raider fighter are close enough that it's easy to imagine some generic raiders being deployed by the Centauri Republic here. But of course, not in this battle. This is going to be an official and great advance for the Centauri Republic as we try to get Polis under control. We can already see the Earth Alliance has been quick to entrench itself. It's taken advantage of the fact that there's a lot of hardpoints, whereas the Centauri here are trying to secure their mines on the far side of the battlefield. Little defense satellites are bombarding our mainline station already as we try to get our economy going. Luckily, the grey murder diamond of the Centauri is quite durable, so we can sustain a lot of bombardment right there. Our garrison Vorchan, supported by a very adventurous Londo Mollari and his tiny little ship, harkening back to his piloting days, are going to take on the mining station in the south there, while the Centauri mines and fighters will have to take care of this little Hyperion-class cruiser getting in there. That cruiser is quickly turning away, and now I think it's time that we start thinking about upgrading ourselves, getting on a higher tech level, because it does take the Centauri quite a lot of time to get going. For the longest time they're really relying on small little patrol boats and such to take care of, well, what amounts to some of the bigger units that the Earth Alliance can muster. And we really don't want to give the Earth Alliance time to get to its really heavy warships like Omega-class destroyers, because those are chunky and armored enough that it will take a lot of firepower, multiple Vultures at least, to take them down reliably. This Vulture is really taking its time to take out this little mine, cripple the economy of the enemy, while our fighters, especially our ambassador, are right in the middle of the fight right there. And even more defense platforms. This is sort of the equivalent of a trench warfare in space with all these defensive stations going on. We will have to get on that and put on some of our own defensive mines, although I don't know how they compare to the big global orbital defense stations, the God stations that the Earth Alliance can build in their massive barrages of missiles. I'm still quite happy with the fact that these are in the game and so much more prominent than they were ever in the show. They have just such a memorable appearance right there. Now, the Hyperion cruiser has been battered quite a lot. The Vorchan is in prime condition, so we can start intercepting some Earth Alliance forces right there, while we will give our station a little bit of a support backup with patrol boats to try and break through these Earth Alliance defenses. Once again, with the overloading weapons capability, we have beautiful rapid fire going on distributed between these two satellites here, some missiles going out as well. This is what I like to see. We will have to keep some squishy fighters in the back lines here, and that's going to be especially difficult with these missile barrages we see right there going on, because fighters do not survive these very easily, but they are necessary to capture the build points and get some of our own infrastructure going. Now the Watcher class is just going to patrol on the left side of the map there and try to help break through some of these defensive lines, maybe take out this damaged station as we try to once again assemble a little bit of a force in the back line in hyperspace so that they can jump in and maybe make a difference, turn the tide of this battle before it gets too far out of hand. There's a bunch of smaller squadrons and fighters going, so let's give this Watcher a little bit of a support network. Maybe this little patrol boat can even help intercept some of these missiles. The Olympus class corvette once again doing its best, but I don't think it's seen any successes comparable to its fighting days in the Minbari War, which was really the prime of its time, if not the Dilga War even before that. Some of these hard points have respawned, so let's try if we can rebuild them, and we already see we have some hero units here, including the son of Emperor Carthage, if I'm not mistaken. As usual, the game has these wonderful little lore descriptions, but they're all in German now because this mod was made in German, and switching it over to English just generates a lot of missing strings, missing text files, because the translation is not in there. Maybe at some point I should do like translations of some of these and see what take on the lore this mod really proposes, because it is trying to create a little bit of a consistent narrative for the various scenarios of these campaigns. Now, are we risking building a mine right here as it's under assault? Probably not, it's quite expensive, but it's only a slight force of the Earth Alliance down there, so we can probably send our Watcher over and clear this up and keep our control of the secondary, of the resource side of the map here. The Drak and their big organic meat shield are taking a bunch of fire again, but they have taken out what stations remain of the Earth Alliance on this first defensive line, so soon we can begin building up some of our own. Now let's see what Dios Ventari is going to be able to do. If I remember correctly, he does have a slightly upgraded version of the Warchan, so a nice forward-facing warship that in this kind of static defense lines can be positioned quite nicely to help take out some of these enemies. Our lone energy mine there is currently in a gunfight with some stations, a fight of defense stations right there. Probably benefits from having some moral support, at least of the Emperor's son himself, coming into battle. We are also once again going to rely on some Drak Raiders to do damage. Hopefully they are quite durable as long as they aren't Star Fury squadrons hunting them down. Oh, and the game chugs for a long moment. There are specific units, and I suspect it's mostly artillery ships, artillery rocket boats by the Earth Alliance that cause this, but weirdly enough, for being as old as it is and modded to hell and back, this game is surprisingly stable. But these kinds of potential crashes are, of course, one of the reasons it's a little bit risky trying to attempt a proper, longer galactic conquest here. Now, Mr. Garibaldi is trying to take out these attacks on the mining station, but he has no success so far. Let's see if we can hunt him down while we put more mines in position to take out these Earth Alliance defense satellites. As we try to move this line forward, let's start thinking about the actual forces that we are going to deploy here. And we already saw in the build menu there, we have a second Londo Mollari in his darkest hour to be exact, where he is on board one of the mass driver vessels that will eventually go and bombard Narn. So that's something to look forward to. Our secondary force here is assembling to clear out what remains of the Earth Alliance task force that took down one of our mines here. We also have to start rebuilding some of the energy mines upstate to get the defense line there going again. But slowly the situation seems to have stabilized, so we can start thinking about some more reinforcements, get ourselves some breathing room. The Drak units are very good money invested, they are very effective for what they cost. So let's try and keep these going. There is a very brave Hyperion down there trying to skirt along the edges of the map and try to eke out victory, or at least deny us this building point, but with a Watcham there, it's only a question of time. More Hyperions are starting a counter-attack here. Let's send our noble leader in there and see if we can't take them out with a little bit of extra support. Now, he doesn't have the weapon overload ability. He can overload his engines and instead be really quick darting back and forth, which is probably quite handy for royal retreat eventually. Now, against the smaller defense satellites, the Drag proved rather effective. Let's see how well they do against the missile barrages of the orbital defense platforms, and it doesn't look quite so good. It turns out nuclear explosions are quite effective even against hyper-advanced organic space technology. Now, with this beauty shot of the Warchan and the burning up Hyperion in the back, I think we are getting in the right position to start a little assault on our own. We see the defensive line repurposing, but just as I say that, an advanced modified Nova Dreadnought comes here, and now these broadsides are quite dangerous if we can't get our... oh, and there he explodes. I was going to say if we can't get our Emperor out of there, that might be an issue. That was too late already. So, investing into some reinforcements of the fleet, let's hope we can clear this out a little bit and our defensive lines along the station are going to hold for long enough. Which means our Warjanet has been spent most of the game on the sidelines, is going to get right into the middle there. We will leave the defense of these resource points to our little automated minefields and try to melt through some of these Hyperions that quickly try to speed away. Once again, the Alpha Alliance tries to drop some orbital defense platforms right in our backyard. Let's see if we can't deny them that, because as annoying as these Hyperions get, they are not up to the task of taking down Centauri warships very reliably. We will have a good kill count of these by the end, I suspect, and well, let's just test how far the industry of the Earth Alliance can go. We have this one smaller Centauri warship at the front line there that's been holding out for quite a long time. Let's use this as our vanguard and get in there. Now there is a Hyperion, well, not a Hyperion, a rocket boat getting out of position, so that is good for us because these rockets can outrange some of our Watching warships, which is very annoying because if they are slightly getting damaged early on, they are not in a position to take on this modified dreadnought at all. And we see the Earth Alliance is trying to flank our defensive lines here a little bit, taking one of the Warchans out of their best position, but as long as we get some defensive lines here, defensive stations going, we should be able to take care of that lone ship quite quickly. Once again, also trying to use a more combined arms approach here, a more balanced fleet composition that maybe is a little bit more survivable. But the battle is getting messy in the middle right here. The Earth Alliance is throwing a lot of quite beefy units at us, so it's going to take probably more than our regular battle groups to take these out. And I think at this stage we are going to start considering what of the heavier units we can get. We are up there on the tech tree now, so we can afford to get into some of the more exotic units. We see the Dreadnought here spraying cannons anywhere. So far it's not focused down on any of our ships very quickly, but it's just laying general damage in every direction, clearly dominating the middle of the battlefield here. And yeah, some of our mainline battleships here very quickly getting melted through. Let's see if we can flank it for a little bit, taking the risk of taking on a full broadside, but as long as we get our weapons overloaded, let's see how well this goes. We see the menacing turrets of the Nova Dreadnought here turning, but not towards the flanking maneuver, funnily enough. Now our resource points are still safe and sound, so we do have the economy to support building up a bigger fleet, and as long as we keep this pressure up, as long as we get the Earth Alliance to waste its resources here, we should be fine. Now getting the last little tech level here, we already know from the previous skirmish, will grant us access to the full strength of the Shadow Fleet. This is ultimately what we want, what we will get at, but ideally not rely solely on that to turn the tide of battle. I've tried that in a previous skirmish that is not in this recording, and it gets to an absolute stalemate eventually, as if the Earth Alliance can throw endless amounts of Hyperions at you, and the Shadow Crab can just take these out no problem, but it doesn't have the staying power necessarily to go up against them and capture new territories, so you get into a very awkward, dense, very serious trench warfare situation where just no side can gain any ground particularly quickly. So this is what we want to avoid here, and who else can help us in doing so than Londo Mollari himself, the man, the legend, not as Emperor yet, but as facilitator of the great victory, the return of the Centauri Republic to the galactic stage. So let's see how well he does this, and very quickly we will get him on the board as our militia unit, our free Warchan, gets back out there and try to make sure that everything stays up and running with our economy. And there we have it, the beautiful warship we first see bringing on the Emperor on Babylon 5, Emperor Turhan that is, on a mission of peace, and then later on, of course, used infamously in the horrific bombardment of the Narn homeworld. So pretty ambivalent vessel right there. But this is unequivocally the latter version it is equipped. We can see here the lattice work of the mass accelerators underslung on this vessel. But it's not the only ability that Mr. Mollari has here. He also has, we see that, the wonderful credit symbol next to his name, because, well, he is at the end of the day a mastermind of diplomacy of sorts, and also has an unlimited amount of money, and he can, and we see that later on, we'll probably hear it quite soon, he can cash in some of these enemy units and essentially bribe them to being on our side. So no longer will the Earth Alliance have an endless Hyperion spam against us, we can turn this against them. And there we have it, a beautiful Hyperion cruiser on our side that we can send straight back into the fray. And now these are the kinds of ships that we can throw away haphazardly, because those are not Centauri lives, we don't care about them. Now there's full artillery barrages by the Earth Alliance going on, but the center stage here has cleared out a little bit. We have gotten ourselves a little more breathing room, and now we can skirt around Londo and see if we can't take out some of that enemy economy that is left at the far end of the map there. Our Hyperion heroically overtaken by our own forces. I just love the image of imagining the silly little Centauri guards in their Napoleonic helmets being used as shock troops taking control of these vessels. Or maybe it is a bribe. Maybe Londo just had a very compelling argument for why these people should defect from Earth Alliance. Although defecting from the Clark regime only to end up in Emperor Carthage's Centauri Republic, I don't know if that is much of an improvement. Poor little Starfield is being flung around here left and right. Of course, they don't do all the kinds of fancy maneuvers that we see them do in the show, because this game does only support the World War II style dogfighting that Star Wars vessels do, but nevertheless it's always quite fun seeing Star Furies iconically in these battles. And now we have the Earth Alliance at full strength here, although it still chooses to only throw various variants of the Hyperion class at us. Maybe it is getting a little bit frantic because we have successfully denied them most energy and resource income, so investing in heavier units is probably something they don't want to do. It might take a little bit too much time. Our defensive line is holding strong. We have a lot of automated turrets right here now, and the first Shadow Crab is just on its way. Let's try not to rely solely on that, maybe just have that as a literal shadow. And oh, there we see mass accelerators and asteroid being flung against this mining station, exploding a bit prematurely in the beautiful effect of the sonic blast that is well known from Star Wars. Now let's see if we can't buy ourselves some more of Alliance units. All this one seems to be getting the idea and quickly going away. Now that we have a Shadow Crab in our backhand, all of this is a much easier affair. No, didn't quite get that one, so just fling an asteroid in that general direction, but let's try to get Londo out of the main lane of the fight. He is not a general that wants to be right in the middle there. He strikes me as somebody who would like to command things rather from a safe distance. Let's have this Olympus-class corvette take the brunt of the fight instead. It's already battered down quite badly, so just flinging some rockets in the general direction of the enemy is more than enough from its side. So now we have on one side our Centauri battle group, on the other side we have our automated defenses, and in hyperspace we have shadow reinforcements. This is shaping up to be a force that can be used for a successful siege even of a fully upgraded Earth Alliance station. But if we've learned one thing from the Earth Alliance, it's to not be hasty, and especially if they bring out some of the big guns against us again. Let's see how this goes if we have a Centauri warship try to take this broadside on, supported by a Shadow Battlecrab, which can also overload its weapons and just shoot even faster. And the armor of the Dreadnought really has no chance. Still, it was fast enough to take down our Centauri battleship quite quickly, so the Centaurum is losing confidence in this conflict with conventional forces and ordering a bunch of Shadow Crabs in instead. Mr. Lord and his associates are by no means invincible, but they have this wonderful cloaking ability which allows them to get out of the dangerous position, shimmering in and out of hyperspace as they do. Although it seems like the Star Furies have gotten the idea and are pursuing probably Warwick Heifer somewhere in there, obsessed with his finding the dangerous beast in hyperspace like we saw in last week's episode. No use running away for very long now, and now finally you can get rid of these pesky orbital defense stations. No more missiles for the Earth Alliance here. Instead, let's get in there, force them to bring out some more Hyperions that maybe we can buy. And with that, the siege on the Earth Alliance station is laid. Now, we already said last time, this is quite a big undertaking. Nevertheless, these stations are quite beefy. And so, let's see how quickly we can bring this out. We have a more advanced Watchman-class battleship there. It has the more segmented wings and a little bit more firepower. Will this be enough? Wonderful to see these like wide-angle shots of the Centauri fleet, and the Earth Alliance still relying a lot on its Star Furies to try and bombard this Shadow Crab, but even though they are not invincible, it is very hard to get them down, especially when they are supported by a Centauri fleet. That being said, this one does break down, and we don't have other Shadow Crabs immediately to get this beautiful maneuver of them docking on with the injured one. So instead, let's just have Londo Mollari bribe the crew, and now the Earth Alliance is gonna be busy in its own little civil war over there. Maybe he does just send over a memo by Admiral Haig and causes extra chaos that way. Now, the Shadow Crab isn't the biggest, baddest thing we can bring to the field. The baddest maybe, but definitely not the biggest and expensive one. We have the proper Drag mothership. Looking at the smaller drag cruisers before, if you remember the drag from Season 5, they have this massive organic vessel, of course, that we see Delenn go up against. And this is what we are going to bring to the field far sooner in this timeline than it is ever in the show. So hopefully this will catch the Earth Alliance quite out of sorts. And there we see it. Beautiful, massive thing. Some shadows in there as well. And now we have created the most horrible possible situation where not only the Centauri Republic is fighting and the shadows are involved there, but they brought their allies out even before they are chased out of the galaxy by Sheridan. Now, the mothership itself doesn't have the biggest amount of weaponry, definitely not the same way as the Shadow Crab does, but it drops a buttload of these little raiders, and we see there wonderful little energy shields going, energy beams going out there, shooting at Star Furies, shooting at the station, and that just creates so many points of attack, so many different things that the Earth Alliance has to worry about. You can see this growing squadron of Drag Raiders here. Inevitably, that is going to break through even the thickest defense that the Earth Alliance can muster. There are still heroic Hyperions in there, quickly being bought up. I think at this point they just see the futility, and yeah, as soon as we start hurling asteroids against Babylon 5, or this level 5 Earth Alliance station, I think it's pretty much over. There was a wonderful shot of the massive mass accelerator cannons that we had under this vessel of Londo. Unfortunately, I don't think in the Galactic Conquest bombarding planets with it is an option. Although maybe, I should check that out. Maybe it acts as kind of a Death Star in this modification. But there we have it. A victory, hard fought, and here 102 Starfleet squadrons, a bunch of Olympus-class corvettes lost for the Earth Alliance, so not a great day. For the Republic of the Centauri, a much better day. I don't see any capital losses apart from one Shadow Crab, and, well, these aren't Centauri lives, so who cares? There we have it. Victory for the Centauri Republic, a nice look at the unit roster that they bring and the way they can slug it out with the Earth Alliance. This, of course, is not the last time that we feature this mod. We will still do a proper faction spotlight with the Army of Light. I promised doing that around the turn of the year, but, well, things got busy, and now we are just going to use these as a nice little filler anytime we have recording scheduling issues like this week. But, of course, I hope to see you especially back next week to our regular scheduled return to the Season 2 episode, A Long Dark. And some of you already commented that if Franklin's comments in the last episode were annoying, this is going to be a wild ride. I can only suspect you are completely right with that. So tune in. As usual, you can find us here on YouTube, of course, but then also on all other platforms from Amazon Music to Google Podcasts to Apple Podcasts. Basically anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find us at the Third Age Podcast. See you then.